restorative. Amen. Many of you might know that our family recently had the gift of taking a 3-week trip through Europe. We went to different countries that we have ancestry from, and we learned about all our connections to our history and our heritage with our 2 teenagers. It was an amazing opportunity. It was so much fun to get to do together. And one of the biggest takeaways for me was noticing how different places, how different cities we visited felt. Not just the cool museums or the incredible food, that was fun too, but there was a feel to each place we were in, how people and spaces were. Like there was a rhythm to how people walked in Stockholm. There was a pace of how they talked when we were in Paris. I noticed how long we would sit and linger over a meal when we were in Vienna. And our kids noticed the directness of how people approached us in Amsterdam. This is part of the gift of travel, right? Our body walks within another space, and we can be more able to feel how we live, how we handle time, how we interact as a community, because every space has that. And underneath that, there's values and systems that have been buried deep under the surface. Even if they're not on display in the museum, there is a feel to a place. My husband Peter, he grew up in Southwest Michigan with a lot of Dutch influence. Something about being in Amsterdam felt familiar his first time there. I grew up in Minnesota, full of Scandinavian and many Swedish immigrants. When I got to Stockholm, I felt like I had been there. You probably felt this too. Being in different physical spaces, our bodies, it ends up absorbing what's under the surface there. A good friend of mine, she recently actually bought a second home in Puerto Rico. She's from New York, but her people and her heritage are from the island, and she felt this deep desire to be physically closer to that part of her story because of how crazy our nation is, because of the assault on Latina bodies, the injustice. She needed to be near the feel of that island more in this season. Many immigrants from different locations will tell us that they miss the feel of that space, that home, the way people laugh, the way they walk. You've probably felt this too. You don't have to travel countries. It could just be that space you visit each year. It could be a vacation destination where you used to live, where family is. Maybe it's a farm with wide open space or a lake, or maybe it's a destination downtown full of energy and life. There's something by being in that space that feels restorative, that wakens something in you that might feel like you're more alive. Because our bodies know. Something at the cellular level, we react to these messages we receive. They might be implicit or explicit. They might be deep down in the bones of a city, but we feel what these spaces are telling us. And so we need to regularly inhabit spaces that communicate to our bodies rest and care, belonging, safety, and aliveness. Beloved, today we're just invited to look again at why we do Sabbath Sunday, why we talk about rest, and connect it to what messages our bodies are receiving so we can find better repair and care for ourselves and for one another. We hosted author Kat Armas recently. She wrote the book Liturgies for Resisting Empire, and she wrote a chapter on this concept of how embracing slowness is actually one of the ways that we resist the dehumanizing messages of empire, and it's all linked to our bodies. In her book, she talks about empire and means really just the pervasive message of power, the top-down control that nations are based on, and how those messages, they actually seek to exert influence over people and cultures and theologies, all the places and ways our common life is structured. And again, they can be explicit or not, but they get into the soul, into the cells of a place. So part of the work of being kingdom people is reshaping those messages and just breaking from them every once in a while. Empire has impacted our country's values, how it feels, the spaces that we're in, and also many places around the globe. Its messages prioritize productivity, consumption, competition, and power. And often, empire uses violence to back that up. So in contrast, activities like being, resting, creating, enjoying, those are not valued as much within empire's logic. So likely part of why many of us have a hard time resting. Often why maybe we don't think to slow down over a meal, or sit in the quiet without reaching for a phone, or even just listen to what our bodies need to be cared for. Part of that is because in our ground, in the spaces we've been shaped, rest feels inherently less valuable or profitable. Resting and caring for our bodies is a luxury. There's other realities, of course, that go into rest. There's resources that you need to be able to break from work. You need access to healthcare to nurture your bodies. And we need communities that are safe and welcoming for all kinds of bodies and ethnicities and genders and different ages and stages of health. There's many ways that we need to combat the messages of empire. But our text from Matthew today, it's the same reminder. And I love it because it's an embodied exhortation about true rest. It's both spiritual and physical. Jesus here is reminding a mostly Jewish audience about spiritual rest, yes. He's inviting them to be free from the heavy yoke of religious rules, of the Old Testament rabbinic law, of trying to be perfect and do it on their own. He's inviting them to freedom and grace in him. But Jesus is also using yoke language. And this is a tired and a worn down people he's talking to. They know the weariness in their bodies, the muscles that get sore from working all day. They know how animals are yoked together with a heavy wooden piece to pull heavy equipment or water or supplies behind them. So in other words, these were people already under a heavy yoke of trying to eke out an existence under empire. They were trying to feed a family and pay their taxes and protect their home. In Palestine, in the first century, there were soldiers all around enforcing empire. There was very little extra resources or commodities or help. There were no dishwashers. There was no groceries to be delivered. So hear this language from Kat Armas. By using yoke language, Jesus is making a profound statement. He is not like the harsh leaders of the world who impose heavy burdens on their subjects. He will not do land possession or high-interest loans, strict religious requirements, or market manipulation. Instead, Jesus offers a yoke that is easy, a burden that is light. He's promising true belonging in a kingdom marked by gentleness, humility, and shared community. It's a kingdom where the poor are free from the constant demands of empire. This message was just as much about rest from physical and society toil as it was about spiritual peace. Beloved, the good news of Sabbath and slowing down is that this is one practice that helps our bodies resist empire. It can let our cells reset. It can remind our bodies we don't have to always do more. And I think summer can be a really good time to remind this. Think for even a moment. Is there a place or a group of people or a destination or a rhythm, a habit for you that communicates deep down to your cells, you can rest here? You can be here. You can slow down. Are there ways you can move that into your weekly rhythm or your yearly rhythm? Are there travel or spaces to get to or people to be with or habits? I think sometimes being in nature and noticing the rhythm of the seasons, it can remind us to slow down, right? The summer is a great time to get outside, to take a walk, to stick your toes in the waves, even just to find a beautiful view that reminds us of open sky, of bright green growth. I know there's a men's hiking group today. They're going to be outside to restore their bodies in nature. Time and community can also remind us of this truth. We can make those intentional choices with others to slow down over a meal, to enjoy and celebrate with people, even if it takes more time, to make space to call or text or write that person, or to just slow down from getting something done and to offer that gift of presence. Creativity and art that can remind us of the need to slow down too. We can, this summer, make some space. Maybe you have a hobby you haven't done for a while. You sew or you draw or get out the watercolors or your guitar, whatever it is. What are things that inside you feel spacious and creative, and make more room for beauty? How do we retell ourselves that creation and art, that's not frivolous or extra? These are needed and restorative and valuable practices. And of course, spending time in God's word and prayer, that also reminds us to slow down. And the truth and the good news that we are not just what we produce, and we do not have to be under a heavy yoke of religious burdens or expectations either. Our bodies, our spirits, were designed to rest, to be cared for, to soak in God's love and acceptance and delight. So this summer, however you're entering, however your body feels, however hurried or tired out, or maybe the burdens and the grief you're holding, maybe the joy and the celebration, may we each remember our God is waiting to meet us in a different kind of rhythm. And those things that kind of seep up in the ground, those things that might be communicating on a cellular level, go faster, hustle, create more, do more. If your body's hurting, push it. If you're recovering from a diagnosis, ignore it. Those messages, we can hear them, we can release them, and we can reroot ourselves in who God is reminding us to be. In just a minute, we're going to move to our practice of rest. We're going to take about 5 minutes, so those online, you can settle in and journal or pray or find an activity to rest. Those here in the sanctuary, you can be comfortable and sit and reflect. We also have candles up front for those here in person. You're welcome to come forward during that time if you want to light a candle to remind yourself of an intention or a prayer or a person you're lifting today. But the purpose of this is just to practice rest. We know there's many ways to do it, many ways to reset, but you're invited to use this time to remember the truth of what our bodies were created for and the invitation of slowness as a place of joy and faithfulness. So as we move into that space of rest, I'm going to read one of the invocations from this book to start our time together. Gracious God, embodied presence that you are, remind us of the sacred value of our bodies. In a world that demands we produce, consume, and repeat, we now choose to pause, to breathe, to listen, to remember that we were not made for exhaustion, but for embodiment, wonder, and rest. We are here to reclaim our time, our energy, and our right to simply be. Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, all you who are struggling hard and carrying heavy loads, and I will give you rest. Put on my yoke and learn from me. I'm gentle and humble, and you will find rest. My yoke is easy to bear, and my burden is light. Thanks be to God.